So this is going to be a case. Now I wish I had an example. From now on, I'm going to show this case of this lady, and these X-rays are going to start taking. They're going to take in 1961. I wish I had this picture flipped around the other way. This one, the person is facing this way, but what they're showing is how nice this beautiful curve is. So when you're facing this way, the curve is supposed to go there. Now, let me show you this first case. This lady. And essentially what happened was a chiropractor took on a client, and at that point she had been going to doctors for 20 years. What he ended up doing was sending records requests to every place who had seen her who had taken x-rays. So that's what we're gonna get to see her x-rays 20 years before, and we'll watch and see, because about every 2 or 3 years she was having so much trouble that they took another set of x-rays to see. And so we're gonna actually get a glimpse of these. Now, at this point, though, I don't know if you can tell this is her this way. What do you notice? Does she have a beautiful curve going this way?
No.
No. It's projecting. She's got a curve reversal. Now, she was in her early 30s. At that point, they didn't do anything about it. Right? Now, she had never been to a chiropractor. She just started with this chiropractor who went back all these years. So this gal, and it was different things, physical therapists, all sorts of things. She had some car accidents. She had some things happen to her. And if it wasn't one thing, it was another. I mean, her journey through life for these 20 years was really a difficult journey. But here, and this one we can actually see down lower. Do you see, what are these things that are starting to grow down there?
Spurs.
Those are bone spurs. So, like I said, where they form is in the area where the pounding has happened. So I think, since the first x-ray we have on this lady is 1961, and her curve was already reversed then, and by 63 she already had a bone spur, I'll bet you she had a bone spur that was forming probably in the 50s, okay? I'll bet you she had something happen to her either when she was a little girl riding a bike, falling off of something, getting in a car wreck, or something happened to her that set in motion this curve reversal. Now, since she was going more to medical doctors and physical therapy, what do you think they were doing to her?
Sending her home.
Well,
Giving
the muscles relaxants, anti-inflammatory. They were doing some physical therapy, and so this gal, she wasn't doing nothing, right? She was going, because these are, this is 1965, right? So you put yourself, now wait a minute here, you in 4 years have already had 3 pictures of your neck. Something isn't working very well. But what I want you to notice is, this was the bad one. Do you notice that this space is starting to narrow? She's starting to get some bone spurs. And that where you can see this big bad one is really the prominent one, but you will start to see it's like it's spreading. Now what do you notice up here? You see the big one? What's happening here now? Do you see bone spurs forming above that one, right? Do you see how this happens? Now, it's not like an infection spreading, all right? But that area where that first bone spur started forming, right where the curve reversal was, that's where it all converged. Well, as that starts to solidify because the bone spur is forming so big, and that stops moving right, as she turns her car, parks her car, and stuff like that, what starts to happen to the ones above and below it? They start to wear out prematurely, don't they? Because they keep getting pounded and smashed and twisted too far because they're trying to make up for what's not happening on the one below it. So this is why when I look at somebody's neck, I can say, oh, too bad for you. You've got arthritis in your neck. You know what but I say, well, wait a minute here. Let's try to make this function as best we could, right? Because if we could get, instead of letting this thing function like a fused segment, which then makes the ones above and below it move too much because they're making up for the lack of movement. If we could actually get this moving and this moving, keep it functioning and rebend her neck so her head was actually up on top of her shoulders instead of drooping forward like this. Can you see how it would transform? Instead of what this lady, and you'll see what she turns into, is really discouraging. But can you see this? And the other thing I want you to notice is up here where her neck is curving in the right direction, you notice there's no arthritis up there. It's nothing to do with her age, right? This gal in her early 30s, this whole thing was, she already had bone spur by the time she was in her early 30s, okay? And then as she went on, now this is 72, so we're now 10 years down the road. So she's now in her early 40s, but she's got bone spurs here, here, and here, right? You start to see, are you understanding this? This is not a disease of old people where they're falling apart. This is a problem of a subluxation that was never caught. And yet, x-ray after x-ray after x-ray is showing the evidence, right? This should not be obscure, and yet it is. The reason is the medical doctors don't look for misalignments of the spine that contribute to the degeneration. They don't think like that. They think metabolic. They think there's a chemical problem or something. They don't think about this.
Dr. Day, is that why we get sick like we do? With the coughing and get bronchitis and get all that stuff? Is that why we get sick?
When you start
because of our bones?
Because, well, think about the nerves. If these bones start to get deformed like this, what's flowing through that area? The nerve. So if there's corrosion of these things, then the space that this delicate nerve is supposed to travel starts getting encroached upon, because these hard cauliflower-like bone projections are starting to grow as this is grinding down, right? So that's, I think you're asking excellent points. All right. And so this, I think I'm going to stop this. I'll have one more slide, but it doesn't show very well. It's too dark. But so that was the first one, the chiropractic. But that second to last one, where those bone spurs were just so dramatic, just drives me nuts. It's this. You could have seen 20 years before that this was going to happen, and she needed to have that curve reversal addressed, but no one did until she finally met the chiropractor. But by that point in time, the fusion was almost complete in those lower segments, wasn't it? So it makes it much more difficult to deal with. But it means this is that much more important to try to do the things, we can see this projection here, and the pounding and smashing has been going uncorrected for decades. So we better start now. When are you going to start? If not now, right? That sort of thing. All right. So at what price? So if in the medical system, what they do is they basically give medication to suppress symptoms. So, I mean, I have so many articles about this. Yeah, I know. Well, so like here's an article. This was in the front page of the Oregonian, where it talks about painkillers can be a killer in itself. And this was talking about Tylenol, right? And this is, and what it does to livers, and how many people are killed with livers. And so many of the liver transplants that are done in our country, most of them, the biggest cause is because people took Tylenol. Or they took Tylenol and then they went and did some drinking, where they did something that was taxing their, and Rush Limbaugh, and the problem he had with addiction to painkillers after surgery, all these things. So we could go on and on and on. But the problem that I have is, if your decision to deal with arthritis is to decrease the pain and decrease the muscle spasm, and you haven't dealt with the underlying cause of why the arthritis is forming, you're missing the boat. And virtually every medical doctor, it drives me nuts. High dose, people are taking these, and these are non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. So if you go down to Walgreens or any, these are the medicines. This is like your Tylenol, your ibuprofen, your Motrin, all those types of drugs. Those are called non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. And at this point, they're all over the counter. And it wasn't true years ago, but it has become true now. And people are under the mistaken impression that if a little bit is good, then maybe taking more will help better. And people are overdosing and doing some serious problems. If we take Motrin by itself or ibuprofen, if you're going to Costco and buying ibuprofen in bulk, for instance, we need to talk, because 1 out of 7 people today who are on dialysis because of Motrin. 20,000 people a year die because they're taking Motrin or ibuprofen. And what happens in the gastrointestinal tract is it creates what are called punch lesions, and this is out of the blue. This is a normal person who's just maybe they sprained their ankle, they were playing football, or they did something. I had a gal this morning show up, she had been to a self-defense class and twisted her knee and was having problems. Well, if her strategy then is to pop the pills instead of getting the function back, and if her body creates one of these what are called punch lesions, where that non-steroidal anti-inflammatory will dissolve. That's correct. It creates. But the ulcers, that's not the least. That may result in ulcer, yes. So I don't want to downplay that, but you tend not to die from ulcer. What you die from is, if it happens to punch a hole right where one of your blood vessels is, you will bleed to death internally. And so that's where about 20,000 people in the U.S. alone die every year from non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. And you guys have to realize, because when you're talking to your friends about chiropractic, there are some people who are scared spitless about chiropractic. The problem is, it's misplaced concerns. It's like someone who refuses to get in a car because they have heard about the car accidents. I mean, it's really, yes, people do die from it, but if you want to get any place, you gotta, how are you going to get there, sort of a thing. And in chiropractic, the beautiful thing is, probably the worst risk would be a stroke, and that's like 1 in a million, if that. And it's not because of chiropractic, but it's because people have cardiovascular problems that pre-exist. You see, so it's kind of